Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our panelists and attendees. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for today's session of our Regional Radio Communications Seminar for the Americas, the ITU Regional Radio Seminar being hosted by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union on this Zoom webinar platform. I am Nigel Casimir, the telecommunications specialist at the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. And just before we really get started with the meat of today's proceedings, as usual, I'd want to share a few tips with you so that you can participate effectively. Identify yourself well. When you log into the webinar, and if you haven't done so today, next time you log in, please sign in with your information, giving it in this order: first name, last name, organization, and country. And as you might be able to see from my name, I've put in Nigel Casimir, CTU, and TT, which is for Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm based. This is necessary to make you easily identifiable for entry to the seminar and for posing questions and for any interventions that might be required. During the seminar presentations, we ask that you post your questions into the Q&A box in order for them to be seen and efficiently addressed. The Q&A box is accessible by clicking the Q&A button located at the bottom of the Zoom window. Using Q&A is especially important because there are hundreds of persons registered for this seminar, and there will be limited opportunities for verbal interventions. It also helps us to deal effectively with the questions that come in. There's also the chat button, and use the chat button for sharing your general comments and information with panelists and or all attendees. The default setting for chat is for sending messages to all panelists. So you need to be sure to select your desired recipients when entering your comments in the chat box. Right? You will be able to change the recipients from all panelists to all panelists and attendees at your option. The seminar presentation slides are and would be posted on the event webpage on the ITU website. And the seminar would continue every day until Friday of this week. The presentation slides might be updated from time to time, and I know ITU updated some of the tutorial slides from Monday after the session. So if I guess you need to make sure that you've downloaded the most recent versions of the slides. Recordings of sessions are also available on the ITU event webpage. Today, we continue with the second day of the forum portion of our seminar, and we'll be having two panel discussions, one before the break and one after. And the one before the break is on emergency communications, which would tend to focus on assistance in preparation of national plans for emergency communications policies and procedural frameworks. We will have that panel moderated by Mr. Alvin Augustine, the Spectrum Officer at the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, ECTEL. And based on the agenda, we were supposed to have a presentation from the ITU. Mr. Isfan Boshoki is the head of their Telecoms, Networks, and Spectrum Management Department at the Development Bureau. And, but we won't be having his presentation today, but his presentation slides will be made available on the event webpage. That still, however, leaves us, apart from Alvin, with 4 panelists. And they are from different areas around the Caribbean and the Americas. Though the panelists would be the first one will be Mr. Glendale D'Souza from the Caribbean Meteorological Organization. And let me just give you a little introduction to, I'll come back to Glendale. The second presenter will be Mr. Aronde Lambert, who is the ICT manager at CDMA. The third presenter would be Mr. Luis Lara, who is the Director General at Hertzia. Luis is a communications engineer, an independent consultant, and he's also founder and director of Hertzia, which is a consulting and telecommunications company based in Mérida in the Yucatan in Mexico. He had experience working with Motorola for about 18 years, dealing with spectrum policy matters. And he's also been Director of Spectrum Planning at the Federal Communications Commission of Mexico. Another speaker on the panel would be Mr. Hazim Mouakit, who is the Vice President of Spectrum Strategy at Intelsat. And he is responsible for shaping Intelsat's strategic long-term positioning in the marketplace. And in doing this, he works closely with the company's business development, asset management, and innovation teams. He's a veteran of the satellite industry, where he has held various capacities over the past 27 years. And he's been with Intelsat till 2015, and prior to that, he served as Vice President of Spectrum Development at O3B Satellite Networks, where he worked on managing and acquiring spectrum assets for this non-geostationary satellite operator. I did mention Mr. Glendale D'Souza, and I'll interrupt Alvin shortly to give a little background on Glendale. And Glendale deals with spectrum matters for the Caribbean Meteorological Organization based here in Port of Spain, Trinidad, which is where the CTU Secretariat is also based. So let me go to or introduce Mr. Alvin Augustine from ECTEL, the Spectrum Officer at ECTEL. And he would take over the panel. I'll help him when he's introducing Glendale D'Souza, the Science and Technology Officer at the CMO. I unfortunately had a little glitch with having his bio at hand. Actually, I do have it now. One moment. Yes. The first speaker actually on the panel will be Mr. Glendale D'Souza, and he has been in the field of meteorology since 1982. First with the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service, and then with the Caribbean Meteorological Organization since August of 2005. And he has been the co-chair of the RA4 task team on the World Meteorological Organization Information System and the World Meteorological Organization Global Integrated Observing Systems, providing advice to regional members on assessing satellite data for all satellites serving this region. He also represents the British Caribbean territories on the World Meteorological Organization's Commission for Aeronautical Meteorology. So we have Glendale, Aronde, Luis, and Hazim, and I'll ask Mr. Alvin Augustine now to introduce this panel on emergency communications. So Alvin, if you would take the floor.
Thank you, Nigel, and bless Wednesday morning, evening, afternoon to all. We have a very esteemed panel for this morning's panel discussion, which is on emergency communications. As Nigel said in the preamble, we have Mr. Glendale D'Souza, who is the Science and Technology Officer for the Caribbean Meteorological Organization. We also have Orande Lambert, who is the ICT manager at the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA. We also have Louis Lara, Director General of HERTSIA, as well as Hasim Mouaket, who is the Vice President of Spectrum Strategy at Intelsat. So at this moment, I would like to apologize for our colleague Itzvan. Those of you who are familiar with the ITU and Itzvan, we all know that Itzvan is a friend of the region, and for us in the Caribbean, he has assisted us in many different aspects.
Mr. Moderator, sorry for interrupting you. I have news. Marisa Delgado will make the presentation of behalf of BDT. So
okay, wonderful.
Connected. Lambert, if you could do at the last one, please.
Okay, thank you, Joachim. Thank you for that intervention. So as Joachim said, there would be a presentation made by the ITU on that part. So without keeping us back, let's get started. And I would like to ask Mr. Glendale De Souza to make his introductions as well as his presentation. So Glendale, it's over to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes.
I hope that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My presentation is going to be on meteorology and radio frequencies. Strangely enough, in meteorology, we make use of radio frequencies heavily for three different reasons. We use it for active and passive observations, and we use it for data transmission between observing sites and data collecting centers. And those data collecting centers may be within the country, or it may be external to the country. The first observing system that we make use of, before I get to the first observing system, let me give you an overview of what our observing system is on the whole world. We have satellite systems which broadcast and receive data from the send it to ground stations. We have surface observing systems, we have upper air systems, and we have weather radars. On the oceans, we deal with buoys, weather ships, and we also deal with aircraft. And all of these are collecting data and have to send it somewhere, which then goes into our models before we can make a forecast about what the weather might be like today or in the next week. For the islands of the Caribbean specifically, I want to touch on the radio frequencies that we make use of for transmitting observations between observing sites, which we call automatic weather stations, to the base stations within the country. And if you look at the information that's contained in the table in front of you, you will realize that we are using free-to-air frequencies like 2400 megahertz. We're using cellular services. We're also transmitting data directly from the observing platform to satellites for rebroadcast, such as in Belize, where they're using 402 megahertz, or Trinidad. But with that comes challenges, because what is happening is that for the most part, countries in the region rely on projects to get observing systems. And therefore the meteorological service may be provided with an automatic weather station or many automatic weather stations in which that frequency has not necessarily been assigned to the Met service within the country, and that is something that needs to be addressed. We are fortunate thus far that, as far as I'm aware, all of the automatic weather stations within the Caribbean, and we do have thousands of them, are broadcasting without any interference as far as I'm aware. But that may change in the future as the spectrum shifts. One of the other things that we make use of data for is in the observing of the troposphere and into the stratosphere within the region. The map that I'm showing you gives you the locations of quite a number of upper air stations which transmit observations twice a day, usually at 8 a.m. in the morning and 8 p.m. in the afternoon. So what is an upper air station? Well, it's basically a transmitter which is attached to a parachute. That's the red graphic within the image that I just brought on screen, which is attached to a balloon. As that balloon leaves the ground, it is being tracked by an earth station, usually at the Met Service site, where it goes up to about 100,000 feet before that balloon eventually bursts. The frequencies that we use for tracking that balloon is between 400 and 406 megahertz. And the radio sun itself is that small thing on the bottom. It weighs approximately 6 ounces, and it's made out of cardboard and plastic with some circuitry within it. These are systems that are relatively passive. Our more active systems are the radar systems that we have been locating within the Caribbean. And the graphic you see in front of you shows you at present the radar systems that within the Caribbean islands themselves. There are more radars, and my next graphic will deal with that. But those systems fall under 3 categories, and I'll start from the bottom and work up. The S-band system, which is best used in the Caribbean because of the intensity of the rainfall, and that is broadcasting an active signal between 2700 and 2900 megahertz. CMO has been responsible for the installation of 5 of these within the Caribbean in Guyana, Trinidad, Barbados, Cayman Islands, and Belize. And we assisted with the tender in Jamaica, but that radar is going to be replaced soon. The frequency that we had assigned, in this case, it was a frequency that we had assigned to those radars is 2860 megahertz. However, that does not mean that we have never had any problems with the signal. The radar is very powerful, and when it pushes out the beam, that is fine. But when the beam is reflected by the cloud to be received by the same antenna that's putting it out, that beam is considerably reduced. And in one of the 5 countries we did the installation of, there was an encroachment by a telecommunications company on the 2860 megahertz frequency, which led to a loss of signal in the lower atmosphere. Of the recent installations we have had in Curacao and one soon to happen in St. Martin, C-band systems. These are relatively new systems for the region. They operate at a higher frequency between 5500 and 5700 megahertz. And thus far, we have had no problems with those. And finally, we have 2 X-band systems that are going to be installed, one in Tobago and one in St. Lucia. These X-band systems has a shorter range than the S-band, which goes out to 500 kilometers, or the C-band, which goes out to 400 kilometers. The X-band can only go out to 120 kilometers. We will monitor that situation and see what happens, but the countries have been advised to apply for a spectrum between 9200 and 9700 megahertz. This actually, which looks a bit congested, shows our radars and their ranges within the Caribbean. And all of this data is transmitted and received by the Met services through their international telecommunication systems, or displayed on the individual countries' Met services website. And as you can see, most of the area is covered by radar imagery with quite a lot of frequency. An observation from the radar might be every 5 minutes in some cases, and it's a lot of information, a lot of wavelength that is being used to push that signal out. Our final observing platform is our international satellite system. And this one is the one that we are most concerned with. Because in the region, most of the area that we are interested in where weather comes from is ocean. That means we can put no observing platform there. We have very few ships. We have no upper level stations between Africa and Barbados. So we rely heavily on the satellite systems that are in place. Within our region, we have 2 GOES, that is geostationary observing systems. Yes, we have 2 GOES systems, one at 75.2 degrees west longitude and one at 137 degrees west longitude. We have numerous polar orbiting environmental satellites, and we also have LEOs, which are low orbiting satellites. The GOES systems is what we are looking for to give us our cloud information, volcanic ash information, anything that will affect us where we are looking for the possibility of having an environmental impact because of a severe weather event. Our polar orbiting systems and our LEOs, low orbiting systems, are where we actually get a lot of data like relative humidity and air temperature, sounding data, whereby the that goes directly into the model so we can come up with a forecast over whatever time frame that we want to be. And that is one of the challenges that we are having right now. So let me get on to my challenges that are occurring. Before I get on to that, I just need to talk about transmission of data between each Met service and our RTH Washington. That's the regional telecommunication hub. Our primary transmission system is via the internet. We used to have a very small aperture satellite transmission that ceased in 2012, and we have started to use FTPS as our main transmission. We do have 2 secondary or backup systems for either receipt of or receipt and transmit of data from Washington to the Met services or vice versa. So the first one is called the Emergency Managers Weather Information Network, which is a receive only. So that means the Met services or the National Disaster Office, which may have a system, and in most cases, or in a few cases, it was 2 entities within the country had it. They receive at 1694.1 megahertz. We have a secondary backup system, which we call RRS Americas, and that is now a broadcast system with 2 ways. That means you can transmit and receive, and that's operating at 4080 megahertz. The changes to this has been new. This used to be RRS Americas, used to be a one-way system until earlier this year. So, our challenges. The first one is that just around 2016, the 1695 to 17 megahertz was shared within the United States, and that may not seem to be a problem for us, but it really was, because quite a number of services had MWIN systems, and they had to change those systems because with the changes to the 1695 to 1710, they could no longer receive their data on the original frequency. Secondly, the 1675 to 1680 megahertz is also looking to be repurposed and to be shared, and that may have a concern for us. Those things are being tested in the United States at the moment to see if there is a problem with the satellites that went up in 2016 and 2017, which is now goes east at 75.2 degrees west longitude and goes west at 137.2 degrees west longitude. Another challenge is with our passive systems, and these are things that were discussed at the last ITU World Ready to Telecommunications meeting that was in 2019, I believe in Egypt, October in Egypt. And the first one has to do with the possible allocations of some of the frequencies within 24.5 to 27.5 gigahertz. Now this is right next to one of our passive frequencies that is measuring water vapor. And water vapor is of critical importance to meteorology because we have a finite amount of it within the atmosphere. It never increases or decreases. It's 0.4% of the total volume of the atmosphere. And if you have water vapor in excess in one region, it means that you have water vapor missing in another region in order to have the excess. And that means you're going to have excessive rain where you have the excess water vapor, and droughts or less rainfall in those areas that you have less water vapor. So this is of particular importance, and I will show you on my next slide why it can impact on us. The other thing about it is that our passive bands, not only the 24.5 to the 27, but some of the higher ones, your ITU is discussing making use of that for the growth of the 5G network, and that may have significant impacts on how we are able to access data over the oceans, especially to input into the models to do the forecast. And with that in mind, let me give you the last graphic I have. This is not on my presentation, which I submitted, but it is of importance. And this graphic is very simple to understand. The first panel is the forecast that ECMWF made of Hurricane Sandy back in 2012 as it was going in, and the forecast put it going inland in an area that they did not expect originally, and it did quite a damage there. And that forecast was made with all the data, both data from the all the observing platforms, including the LEOs and GOES and the POES satellites into the model. The middle panel, the middle image, shows what would happen if we just took out all of the polar orbiting and all the LEOs data out of the model input. And you can see that where the forecast had the system going in on land, at that point in time, the model output was now saying that it would remain further out at sea. The storm will be greater in extent. So that means the winds are possibly weaker, whereas where your storm is tighter or more compact, your winds are possibly stronger. And the last panel on the right actually shows the verification of the model. So what actually happened? The first one shows what the forecast was. The second panel shows what the forecast would have been if we had omitted the polar orbiting data from the satellites or the low orbiting data from those satellites. And the last one actually shows you where the system went inland. And if you remember, this did a lot of flooding in New York back then, and you can see that the verification actually goes out very well. It is modeled very well by the control forecast in the first panel. And with that, I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Glendale, for that most excellent presentation. It was very informative, and I would like to add that the way it was presented, especially with the forecasting of storm, is of great relevance to our region. And as I said, we would like to coordinate with all agencies, especially the meteorological agencies and disaster preparedness, when it comes to the use or planning for spectrum. And thank you again for that presentation. So moving on, I would like to call on Mr. Orande Lambert, who is the ICT manager at the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, to make his presentation. Orande, when you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see? I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So today I am going to just briefly, what I've been asked to just give a brief on SEDIMA's current plans and regional initiatives related to emergency communications, but also I'll also speak to just one or two areas also of coordination for based in the Caribbean for the efforts that we're doing right now. The presentation will also just briefly touch on, what we are doing sort of to ensure that we are ready or be better or prepared in the area of emergency telecommunications. So firstly, I'll just give you a brief synopsis of what we are, or who we are, sorry. So basically, for those who don't know, SEDIMA is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, and we're the CARICOM agency tasked with the management of disaster management in the region. We subscribe to the, oh, sorry. Okay, yes, we yes. subscribe to the concept of comprehensive disaster management, which basically is an all hazards approach to disaster management. So it means that, yes, we like to say we're in hurricane season, but we're not just limited to hurricanes. As you know, the Caribbean of itself is a very hazard-prone region. So comprehensive disaster management takes into account all hazards and all phases of the disaster management cycle. So how did SEDIMA come about? So basically, it started out from the Pan-Caribbean Disaster Preparedness and Prevention Project, which then morphed into the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Response Agency, SEDERA. But what was realized is that the mandate of SEDERA needed to be expanded to include a concept which had been developed called the Caribbean Disaster Mitigation Organization, which ended up with the emergence of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which is what we are now. So we're basically located in Barbados, and our program of work includes preparedness, response, mitigation, education, and information and research. And that just briefly tells you what our mandate is. So one of the key things that you would know, that we mobilize and coordinate disaster relief, which is probably no matter what we do, which is the one area where we are known for and judged on, and that is how we deal with a disaster response. So basically, our philosophy is changing lives through comprehensive disaster management. I won't go through the vision statement, and that will be in the presentation that you can go through, but just bear in mind what our philosophy is, which is changing lives through comprehensive disaster management. We envision a safer Caribbean, safer lives, safer Caribbean, or more resilient Caribbean. That's what SEDIMA is after. So this just speaks to comprehensive disaster management. And as I said before, it is the management of all hazards through all phases of the disaster management cycle. And it involves everyone. It's not just one section of society, it's everyone is involved in comprehensive disaster management. And as you can see, when we developed CDM, it was a paradigm shift from where we were, because before it was you were being reactive, you're waiting for a storm or hazard to cause some problems, then you react to it. It was disaster office centric, meaning that you're only focused on one area, and the focus was, as I said, on the individual hazard. But CDM takes it a step more. You become more proactive. You're anticipatory. The responsibility is shared, and you view the hazard exposure as an ongoing process that aims to reduce vulnerability across all sectors. So right now, we are made up of 18 participating states. It's maybe before the year is out, it will most likely become 19 because we are in very advanced talks with Cayman Islands, and they are ready to come on board. So as it stands right now, we're officially 18 states, soon to be 19. And we basically span the Caribbean. SEDIMA of itself is for management purposes, and ease of operation, we have divided our operations into sub-regions. So we have 4 sub-regions. The Northwestern sub-region, which is headed by Jamaica, they're the sub-regional focal point for the Northwestern region. The Eastern sub-region, where Antigua and Barbuda is a sub-regional focal point. The Central sub-region, where Barbados is a sub-regional focal point. And then the Southern sub-region, which Trinidad and Tobago are the focal point. And this basically allows us to, in our operations, to better focus our energies as we respond or as we do anything related to disaster management in the region. So before I get into the emergency telecoms, which I will, I just want to give you a brief synopsis of how we operate. And basically, for us to be able to do anything requires, there's a framework called the regional response mechanism, which is diagrammatically explained in front of you here. And it is what allows us to coordinate in the region. We have many partners, many teams, and this basically is how we operate, and the mechanism through which we operate. This diagram just speaks, it's a bit busy, but it just speaks to the actual operational of the RRM itself. So the RRM basically is triggered in a level 2 or level 3 incident. And this explains basically level 2 is when some external assistance is required, while level 3 basically is when the capacity of the state is overwhelmed. But that said, because of what has been happening, there's now a debate if we need to sort of have an additional level. As you will have known, with all these category 5 hurricanes that have been becoming a lot more frequent, and the damage that they're doing, sometimes the state, we've realized that sometimes the state may not necessarily be in a position to respond, and it may require a different level. But that is ongoing, and that is for future operations. So now to basically what I want to discuss. And these are what are our current plans? What are the regional initiatives that we are working on? What are we doing to ensure that emergency telecommunications in SEDIMA and within the SEDIMA system is enhanced? Because one of the things that everyone would know is that in the event of any disaster, communications is key. If you can't communicate, you're in some serious problems. So we need to be able to have not just be able to communicate, we will need to have reliable communications, secure communications. And before I speak to the emergency telecoms, I will speak to an initiative that is ongoing right now as we speak. And as you all know, we can't get away from COVID. And and that is where we are right now. So we've been sort of active and coordinating the COVID response for the region since, I think it's February, March, if I remember correctly. And this diagram just speaks to the area where we are focused on. The actual health sector response coordination is being done by our sister agency, CARFA. That's the Caribbean Public Health Agency. But where we are focused on is the multi-sectoral response coordination. So our regional coordination center, which is what referred to there as the RCC, is going ahead and liaising with our many partners to ensure that the COVID response in the region is moving smoothly and properly. So one of the main takeaways coming out of this COVID response is an operation called the Regional Logistics Hub. Now, this hub was, we were mandated by the CARICOM heads of government to form this hub. The hub basically is a primary repository for transshipment for COVID supplies that are coming into the region for the countries. And it's to also aid in coordination of humanitarian logistics. And as coincidentally, today is actually the first day that that hub is in full operation. It's been weeks and weeks of serious planning, and now we are actually in operation today. In fact, there's probably going to be a presentation based on the first set of relief supplies that have been coordinated through the Caribbean Development Bank today, and you'll probably see that in the press later on today. And so this regional logistics hub is what we are mandated to do, and it's most likely going to become a legacy feature and probably will be used throughout and in the future. The hub basically is it's dealing with operations at the port. It's based in Barbados. Operations at the port, the seaport, and the airport, and it deals with transshipment, things coming in to be transshipped to the affected countries. This just speaks quickly to how the hub is operating: arrivals, repackage, assembly, inventory management, and onward export. And I must say that we've had to rely heavily on our partners for this, and so far it's as hard as it has been to get up and running. It is going to serve a very, very great purpose. We also have a system that ties into all of this called the Caribbean Risk Information System. You may or may not have heard of it, but this is a system that's going to get a lot more use. It is really truly going to allow us to do a lot more evidence-based decision making as we move forward. Right now, we are making use of it. If you go to our webpage, that's www.sedema.org. There's a COVID-19 section, and that area is being fed by the specific form of the CRIS called the GeoCRIS, which is the geospatial part of the CRIS. Okay. So what are we doing to strengthen emergency telecommunications? As I said before, we've realized that emergency telecommunications is sort of a challenge that we have in the region for, well, I should say reliable emergency telecommunications when we deploy. So I'll just quickly go through what we are doing to strengthen this, and you'll have a better appreciation for the efforts and initiatives that we're going through. So one of the areas that we're looking at right now is the development of a regional emergency telecommunications strategy and plan. We've received some funding from Global Affairs Canada. You will see them feature a bit in this presentation because they've been very proactive in this area of emergency telecommunications, and realizing that there's some there to put some funds into there to ensure that initiatives are done. The tender has been completed, and we're in the process of selecting a consultant. And the aim of this strategy is to strengthen the regional telecommunications architecture. Also, one of the areas is that we want to develop a set of minimum standards which our disaster officers and our countries can sort of measure themselves against to say that this is the bare minimum that you need for proper emergency telecoms. So that consultancy will start very soon, and it's one of the areas where we know that we're going to reap great benefits from it. Also, we've been able to enhance our human resource capacity. Through the funding, we've been able to hire a senior program officer for telecommunications. It's actually the first time that CDIMA has been able to have a dedicated resource in the area of telecommunications, and that he's going to be driving a lot of things in-house for us. Also, we've established a CARICOM emergency telecommunications team. It was a concept. It's in the process of being formalized, but this basically is envisioned as a regional information communications, a body of regional information telecommunications individuals who are tasked with ensuring that there's reliable communication between the impacted state and the regional coordination center in Barbados. Another key area of emergency telecommunications, as you know, is training. We've been able to train so far from last year. We trained 19 professionals. This was sort of the genesis of the Caribbean Emergency Telecommunications team. This training was conducted through our partners, World Food Program and the Emergency Telecommunications Cluster. And this is, we envision, may not necessarily be the same partners over and over, but we do envision constant training for this team and other teams in the area of emergency telecoms. There's just one of the pictures of some of the equipment that was set up. Going hand in hand with the team is the need for procurement of more tools and equipment. And we've been able to put out a tender for this equipment. The tender has been completed and we're currently at the evaluation stage. So even this is another area where we are going to be able to boost our response in the area of emergency telecoms. At CDIMA, we know that exercising is a very important thing and it ensures readiness. So far for this year, we've had, and these are just specific telecoms sort of exercises, Region RAP. We've had Region RAP 2. We've done some tests with the French military specifically. We have an upcoming test simulation exercise with Canto and Carlec, and we run weekly radio nets to ensure readiness. And last but not least, we could not do all of this without the partnerships that we have. Partners with the government agencies, international organizations like the ITU. We've had a cooperation agreement with the ITU for a very long time, and they've been a very, very good friend to us. The National Disaster Offices, the National Amateur Radio Societies, the private sector, and regional organizations like sister organizations like the CIMH and the CTU. We've been able to leverage their expertise in areas to assist us and the region. And that basically is my presentation. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much, Orande, for that most detailed presentation. And would like to thank CDIMA for the work it has been doing to support the Caribbean, especially in disaster relief management. As we move on, time is against us, so I'll quickly introduce our next speaker, who is Mr. Luis Lara, who is the Director General of HRTSA. So Luis, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Alvin. Thank you very much for the introduction. Just let me share my screen. I hope you can see my slides now.
Yes, Louis, it's on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank ITU and CTU for the invitation, for the kind invitation to this panel. In addition to that, I hope everything is going well with each of you and your families and in these difficult times. So my presentation is about how radio communications are able to respond on emergency situations, and I will also cover some spectrum issues that are closely related to the solutions on emergency communications. So my first slide is about the risk management. As you know, Sidima and the previous speakers talk about risk management in general. Obviously, risk management requires information sharing and close coordination. So that is in fact what risk management is trying to promote, and that is exactly the portion where emergency telecommunications can help the most. You know, the objective of a good emergency telecommunication plan is to address the risk management needs by ensuring anywhere and anytime communications in order to have timely and effective information sharing within the communities at risk. So how we can build an emergency telecommunications plan? Well, first of all, we need to take into consideration that an emergency plan is unique. Obviously, the hazards and vulnerabilities will be different between regions or even within countries. The emergency plan should be aligned with the National Disaster Risk Management, which it should have clear processes and protocols, including obviously the point of contacts and escalation policies, in order to make sure that you will know for sure who should be able to who should contact in one organization and what will happen if that contact is not available. You should have some escalation policies available within your emergency telecommunications plan. Obviously, you should have inventories of all the telecommunications available for this, including early warning systems and the telecommunication systems that are available to respond the event. It should be available. How will be the cooperation with the international organizations and the assistance that will obviously coming from other countries or other regions, training activities, and finally the telecommunications plan should guide how the stakeholders will be focusing in order to develop their own emergency plans. I'm talking in this particular case, for instance, of crisis management within operators and maybe within companies in order to make sure that will be available to maintain an operations of the different networks and also of the operations of the companies. What would be the key elements in order to build an emergency network? It should be multi-hazard. It should be prepared to maintain operation and reduce damages, even in the worst case scenarios. It should consider that it needs to be multi-technology in order to have redundancy of networks, as well as a solution for remote areas that eventually will need some assistance. And in my view, it should also be standardized, and the emergency network has to work within the regional and harmonized spectrum in order to make sure that assistance that eventually will be coming from other countries will be able to operate their own systems, That's a key element in order to make sure that there will be some kind of interaction within the country by their own coordination organizations, but also with the other organizations that will be helping in the country when the emergency is happening. An important element in order to promote land mobile system for public protection and disaster relief is that in 2003, the resolutions, the ITU resolution 646 was approved. In that resolution for our region, for region 2, there were a number of bans that were allowed in order to promote harmonization for public protection and disaster relief. We were talking at that time of the 700 megahertz band, the 800 megahertz, and also the 4.9 gigahertz band. The resolution 646 was revised in 2015. In that new resolution, the frequency range 694 to 894 was approved in order to promote harmonization, particularly for broadband public protection and disaster relief systems. The particularities of how this band will be used in terms of frequency arrangements can be found in ITUR recommendation in 2015. And now talking about the satellite services on emergencies. Satellite is obviously an important part of the emergency recovery efforts, particularly when you need to be connected with the outside world. If an area of a country is suffering, you need to interconnect with other countries or other organizations in order to maintain the communications and receive help as soon as possible. In that portion, I can share to you some slides that were provided to me by courtesy of Global Star. Global Star is using a LEO system in order to provide a mobile satellite service communications. They use the C-band for the feeder links and the S-band and L-band for the connection with the terminals. But the important part of that is that the system is currently used for the emergency communications. In this slide, you can see the rescues that have been able to recover using the Global Star system. So you may wonder why I'm presenting this slide from Global Star. Something important that is happening in terms of frequency for emergency communications is that the current systems, particularly land mobile systems, and also the satellite systems, and the frequencies need to be protected. Need to be protected in order to maintain their current operations that provide assistance to people, assistance to countries in terms of emergency communications, but also the systems need to be supported in order to continue the development in their system allocation. So it's important for you to consider that eventually when there is a discussion of additional allocations or to any services, you should take into account that frequencies could eventually be used for emergency communication systems, regardless it is for land mobile communications or satellite communications. So that's a key element to consider for any discussion about allocations in the WRC. that is all I wanted to cover. Obviously, I've been providing some support to different countries and organizations. I've been able to support also CTEL efforts in terms of public protection and disaster relief spectrum. I was the spokesperson for CTEL in the WRC 15 negotiations, so I'm happy to take any questions regarding to my information that I just presented. And that is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much again for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Luis, for that very detailed presentation. And I would ask Hasim Muakat to make his presentation. And Hasim, I don't want to pressure you for time, but we are kind of against the clock. So please go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right, and can you see my presentation?
Yes, Hakim, you could go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to thank everybody for this opportunity and to be here with this esteemed panel. My name is Hasim Muakat. I'm the Vice President of Spectrum Strategy at Intelsat. Without further ado, and recognition of limited time, I would like to proceed. So what I would like to talk to you today about the role of satellite communications in emergency communications. And this is the agenda for today's meeting. And also to give you a bit of a regulatory perspective on this segment. And then lastly, we'll talk about some innovation in satellite communications that could serve emergency communications. Okay, so first I would like to start with a question about why satellites remain the medium of choice for emergency telecommunications. I mean, in times of disaster, satellites are really positioned uniquely to provide such communication. First, you have the reach. The reach of satellites is unmatched by any other means. You can have a global coverage, and this map here shows you, for example, the coverage map, the collective coverage map of our Intelsat EPIC satellites. The economics of it, there's already an existing infrastructures with hundreds of thousands of installed earth stations around the globe. So you have an existing infrastructure that you can rely upon. And then lastly, and most importantly, resilience. As you know, satellites are, geostationary satellites are positioned 36,000 kilometers above Earth. So they are not susceptible to weather conditions or vandalization or sabotage or anything of that sort. They transcend any adverse conditions on the ground. In particular, also, when we can talk about C-band, certain frequency bands are not even susceptible to weather conditions. So they work during rain or during any adverse weather conditions. This is key as to why satellites are important. So the use cases, what do we use satellites for? So the cases are pretty broad. They cover many facets of emergency communications. So you have emergency response, connectivity to partners, camp management, aid distributions, and so on and so forth. So the satellites are truly used across many areas of emergency telecommunications. So to give you a perspective on how the United Nations, the High Commission for Refugees, what their views on satellites. So even though this is taken from a presentation that was given during WRC 19 by a UNHCR representative. So then they say that although they rely on many communications, nothing really matches satellites in terms of location and coverage and resilience, because it's not affected by disasters, man-made or natural disasters. The UNHCR relies on nearly 300 megabits of space segment, primarily in C-band and Ku band. And in spite of the high promise or the high expectations of 5G, they cannot rely on that technology, at least in the short and medium term, because it's unlikely to cover the areas where they want to be. I mean, as you would imagine, you have a disaster, it's likely that the ground infrastructure is the first to go. So what remains is satellite that comes from high above. So, and it's not only UNHCR that uses it; it's used across many United Nations bodies. You know, and right now with COVID, it's the situation is even more acute. So it's used by many aid agencies. So the regulatory context for this is really important. So like you look at the situation of satellite communications and emergencies. So as you can imagine, when you encounter an emergency, when you encounter a disaster, you are not going to build a telecommunication system right then and there. You have to be prepared. You have those telecommunications infrastructures have to be in place at the time of disaster, before the disaster strikes. And in order for these systems to be in place, the favorable regulatory environment must exist. So one key element is for example, is spectrum. You know, if there's risk around spectrum, and this is kind of to highlight some of the points that was raised by the previous panelist about spectrum harmonization. If spectrum is not available and is not secured and it's not allocated in a secure manner, the incentive to build satellites that will be available during time of disasters is not going to be there. So having this regulatory certainty is really key. The favorable regulatory environment in terms of access, in terms of market access. Again, when you have freedom of movement, when you have reasonable fees, when you have no impediments to movement of equipment, again, that helps. So having the regulatory certainly in time of peace, building capacity leads to building capacity and preparedness, and leads to quick response and recovery. So eliminating the red tape is also very important. So it's being prepared during the time of peace in order to be able to quickly respond in the times of disaster. So some of the key regulatory takeaways, you know, for regulators to consider is, again, I would like to highlight three issues. First, regulatory certainty. That satellite spectrum is constantly under attack, and therefore satellite spectrum has to be protected. If you want satellites to be available during times of disaster, then the spectrum has to be protected now and in the future. And at the same time, we realize that regulators need to balance the needs of all stakeholders, you know, and have a strategic view of what they need and what they may need in the time of disaster. Regulatory flexibility. Often, as we all agree, regulations lag behind innovations. So do not let regulations impede the innovation. So, and one case in point here is that the lines between, for example, FSS and MSS, like fixed satellite service and mobile satellite service, are really disappearing and becoming blurry. So let's not get caught up with specific definitions about FSS versus MSS. Look at the overall service that is being offered. And then the last point is market access. Again, favorable conditions for market access conditions during the time of peace lead to favorable outcomes during disasters. So, and this would also lead to build capacity during time of peace. So my last point is to collaborate with industry. You know, early planning collaborate with industry to do early planning, to do training, and to do capacity building. That goes a long way in terms of being prepared for times of disaster. Just real quickly at the end is a brief discussion about innovation, about products, things that the satellite industry, that Intelsat is doing to help during times of emergency. So we have a product, for example, called FlexMove. It is a managed service that allows us to provide services for mobile terminals, being on trucks or communication on the move or communication on the pause, and it allows for high throughput data rates. So up to 5 by 2 megabits for communication on the move, or 10 by 3 megabits for communication on the pause. So essentially, it's a managed platform. It allows users to purchase capacity as they need. They don't have to invest in a platform. They don't have to invest in the infrastructure. They just get the terminal and they operate off of our managed platform. So in a way, it's kind of like you purchase the services by the drink rather than to have to buy the entire platform. And this is to show the progression of speed. So now the L-band system and the S-band system typically have a lower throughput, and as technology evolves, we go toward the FlexMove system, which offers throughput in the megabits rather than in kilobits. So, and lastly, just for my last slide, the verticals that are really important what can be addressed by this product is the first responders in times of emergencies and intergovernmental organizations or non-governmental organizations. So it allows us to provide services at high speeds and very quick turnaround fashion. So again, thank you very much. I hope I was able to stay on time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hazim, for that very detailed and well put together presentation, and again, making efficient use of the time. Again, I would like to move on to, we have a presentation from Maritza Delgado of the ITU. So Maritza, if you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for allowing ITU to present. We had a little inconvenience at the beginning, but we are ready now. So I'm going to present what ITU is doing in terms of emergency telecommunications. I think everything has been said now, and I am going to provide a summary of what has been said and on what ITU is also doing to help member states to be more prepared and become more resilient when disasters strike. I'm going to share my screen with the presentation, and you will let me know if you are able to see it.
Yes, Maritza, we can see your screen.
I am going to turn the video off because of bandwidth. So let me see if I am able to turn it off. Okay, so I am going to present what ITU, the role of ITU in emergency telecommunications. And we have heard, as I mentioned in the other presentations, that information and communication technologies are a critical tool when it comes to disaster management and risk reduction activities. Without telecommunications, we cannot do anything. Telecommunications help us to not only monitor all hazards, analyze data, but also to deliver that information to all parties that are involved in disaster management, and not only stakeholders, but also vulnerable communities and populations that are at risk. And I think this is what we have to aim for, to involve communities in all these overall framework, because everything that we do is to save their lives. So ITU is involved in the 4 phases of disaster management. The first is mitigation, second preparedness, response, and recovery. And like, for example, in the mitigation phase, we have been involved in providing, in helping countries to assess their needs in terms of the use of ICTs for disaster management. Like, for example, to assess what type of technology can be used to develop an early warning system, to implement that early warning, and to deliver that those warnings to the end populations. As we heard, also, development of policies, legislation, frameworks are vital. Because if we don't have these frameworks being developed in advance, then we are facing a big issue when it comes to respond to disasters. We cannot afford to respond in the response phase, start developing those frameworks and think about regulatory issues, licensing of equipment, because normally we receive and countries receive support from different UN organizations, including ITU, including the Emergency Telecommunications Cluster, as we heard before. And these frameworks, regulatory frameworks, permissions should be developed in advance. Implementation and capacity building, training exercises, we also heard that, and we are working very, very closely with Emergency Telecommunications Cluster at a global level to deliver these trainings as well. We know that it's not only one technology that fits all. We need to include different technologies in this work of the use of technologies and communication technologies in the disaster management cycle and disaster risk reduction activities. In the response phase, of course, we need this telecommunications equipment to respond to the emergency itself. You know that we just heard about the important role that satellites play in the aftermath of disasters. We can only rely on satellite when it comes to a big disaster. Why? Because they are the most easy technology to use and it's reliable. But these has to be also be prepared in advance, and to know that these technologies can be used and can restore the telecommunication links to provide the way and the means for all the stakeholders to get connected. But this cannot be, start being used in the response phase. They have to be taken into consideration way in advance. And we also help countries to, in their recovery phase, to rebuild resilient ICT infrastructure with the aim to build back better. And not only that, but also to restore public sector operations, business continuity as well. So these are the actions that we are involved in. And how do we do this? We do this by developing national and regional workshops on the use of ICTs, and this is one of the type. This was not developed by BDT, but we are in close cooperation with the Radio Communications Bureau of the ITU by developing these workshops that are critical to be ready to respond to any disaster. So we do these, but we not only do these in times of response, we do this in advance. Why? Because we need that all the stakeholders that work in disaster management get together to organize themselves and collaborate, build partnerships. So that is something else that we do. They try to build and forge more partnerships in the sense of using ICTs for disaster management and risk reduction. We also do project implementations. We have different projects going around. And I heard also from some interventions that you have been collaborating with ITU developing different projects. And capacity building, it's not only about the drills and exercises, it's the concrete work. It's about the concrete responsibilities and roles that everybody need to know. Because when we work on emergency telecommunications, it's not only about the ICT sector. Everyone involved in disaster management, the disaster response at a national level should be involved and should be collaborating between each others. So each other should know which are the responsibilities of each one of the organizations and how they will act in the preparedness and in the response phase. We also have different applications that can enhance disaster resilience, like, for example, big data and also other different projects. Why we do this? Because we know that ITU has a big impact in an important role in disaster risk reduction, and technologies are key to address and achieve the 2030 agenda for the sustainable development. And along and as part of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, ITU has a strategic plan and has a specific target that says that by 2023, all countries should have national emergency telecommunications plan as part of their national and local disaster risk reduction activities and strategies. So I heard a very good presentation from before mentioning what our national emergency telecommunications plans are. And as we heard in that presentation, a national emergency telecommunication plan is a national strategy that ensures communications availability during all phases of disaster management. But it, as mentioned before, it cannot be done alone. It has to involve and has to have a multi-stakeholder approach. And these plans, what they do is that they promote the coordination across all levels of government. With this plan, we stop working in silos and duplicating the work that many of us or many organizations do. So our aim is to promote the coordination by engaging all the stakeholders, not to think only to the response phase, but to think through the life cycle of a potential disaster, of the disaster management cycle. We cannot only focus on the response. We need to work throughout the phases. And throughout the phases, we need ICT capacities, ICT capabilities for emergency response. We need to carry out an analysis of the critical telecommunications infrastructure. We need to know where are the places, which are the rural areas that do not have any coverage and for which we need to provide any connectivity, but before the disaster happens. Why? To reduce their vulnerability, their vulnerability. We need to establish also plans and procedures for the disaster response. We cannot do it just from one day to another. It has to be very well designed. These plans also support the development and the implementation of regulatory frameworks. As mentioned before, these regulatory frameworks, policy, and legislation are the ones that really support and enable the use of the national emergency telecommunication plans. And also, it is very important to establish a governance framework of roles and responsibilities of each one of the entities participating there. We need to know which are the focal points. We need to know the phone numbers. We need to know what the health sector will be, who is the focal point in the health sector, in security, which is the phone number, who are we going to contact, who will be representing that entity when a disaster strikes. So we need to have everything in advance. So that's why the national emergency telecommunication plans are very important, because it really provides a support to all entities to have a better understanding of the ICT infrastructure that is in place and can be used for disasters. On this regard, knowing that this is a very important topic, ITU has developed the guidelines for national emergency telecommunication plans. But why are these guidelines needed? They are an important tool to assist national authorities to develop a clear and user-friendly national emergency telecommunication plan with a multi-stakeholder approach. What we have been experiencing in the past years, over the past, let's say 10, 11 years, is that countries do not know how to develop these plans. And they have a lot of questions and they need a lot of support. So what we have done is, in order to address that issue, develop these guidelines, which provide a step-by-step describing the main elements that that plan should consider in each one of the phases of the disaster management cycle, which are the activities in the mitigation phase, preparedness phase, recovery, response and recovery. And also these plans, we can have the best plan in the world, but if we don't implement the plans at a national level, then we have not done anything, because these plans should be implemented. Everybody should know what a national plan is. Everybody should know how to, which are the responsibilities in that specific plan. So that is one of the main activities that we are focusing on. Once developed, implement the plan. And these plans should be a living document. We cannot have a plan that was developed in 2010 and it's still valid, because we have faced different issues, different hazards. We have faced many disasters, and disasters change the way of living. And we have also, to address that issue, that the plans should be become a living document, we have also developed the Emergency Telecommunications Tabletop Simulation Guide. This guide was developed jointly with the Emergency Telecommunications Cluster of the World Food Programme. And the purpose is to also assist member states on how to plan, how to design, and how to conduct these tabletop simulations. Because, you know, a country should be resilient. It should know how to develop these plans so they can become active doing these exercises. And why tabletop and not big drills? Because tabletop exercises are a very simple exercise, but very, very useful. In this tabletop, which everybody is around the table, these are conducted in a simulated emergency scenario. And everybody should know what are the responsibilities, what they are, their roles, and how each one of the entities are going to respond to that simulated emergency. And this is very effective. We have developed some of these exercises in different places, and we have come up with very, very good comments from participants, because they said, now we know how, for example, to include the customs authorities. You know that customs, when emergency happens and we want to import equipment inside the countries, the clearance processes are huge and they take a lot of time. And sometimes it takes more than a month. So to avoid this, we are inviting the customs authorities to participate in these simulation exercises, which
Marissa?
I think, yes?
Yes, this is Nigel Castamere from CTU. We are kind of out of time, so I'll ask if you could tend to...
Yes, don't worry, I'm going to finalize. Yes. Sorry. So we have developed these guides. And also we have developed, based on this emergency pandemic that we are facing right now, we have also developed this contingency plan. And this guide provides you with a set of actions that countries would take to prepare for and to be ready to respond to any emergency like this one, by ensuring network continuity and service delivery to everyone. Like, for example, us working and holding these workshops remotely. So with this, I invite everybody to join ITU, and all the information that I have provided is on our website. And this is just something on early warning systems, mentioning that they should be multi-hazard, multi-stakeholder, and multi-technology, so early actions can be taken. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Yes, Maritza, thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to, on the behalf of the ITU member states, thank the ITU for its support and cooperation in the areas of emergency communications. So folks, that wraps up the discussions, the presentation by our panelists. Nigel, I think we could move to questions.
Yes.
On the chat.
I noticed that presenters have been answering questions throughout. In the Q&A, they've been writing answers. You could probably just review them to make sure that everything has been
yes,
clearly addressed.
I think most of the questions.
Click the answer tab. Click the answered tab at the top of the Q&A box, and you should see all of the questions, and you'll be able to access the answers as well.
Yeah, I believe most of the questions have been answered in the answer tab. But just for the panelists, we mentioned emergency communication. One of the areas in which emergency communication would require some intervention would be in terms of coordination. How do you see coordination among the different, whether it be member states or different agencies? How does coordination play a role in forming an emergency communication policy or emergency communications plan? So that's a question to the panelists.
I can, this is Hazem from Intelsat. I can just say a couple of points, which were, I think, highlighted before in all the presentations. Any coordination needs to happen well in advance of any disaster. I mean, all of things have to be in place well before a disaster happens or there's a situation of emergency. From our perspective, one key point of alignment is on the regulations and on spectrum harmonization, so that when you, for example, you want to deploy a terminal into a country and you discover that that country has decided to do something else with that spectrum, or if you don't have a harmonized approach to spectrum, it makes responding to communications very difficult. So harmonization on the regulatory side is very important. Harmonizing the regulations on telecommunications is also very important. So it needs to happen at multiple levels. And then there's the point about partnership with industry, because obviously you're relying on networks that are provided by private companies or commercial companies. So that coordination has to happen in advance, and the relations have to be in place well in advance before the disaster happens.
Okay, thank you for that response. So, I think any more questions?
Alvin, if I might just add a little Caribbean color to the answer that Hassim provided.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Just to highlight, since we have a wider than just Caribbean audience, that within the Caribbean, we have the Caribbean Spectrum Management Task Force, which is coordinated by the CTU.
That's right.
And that is a platform where we bring together the multiple stakeholders to address matters of spectrum harmonization. And this year, in fact, on the work program of that task force is harmonization of emergency communications, which is a part of our general strategic plan actions. And our moderator, Alvin Augustine, is actually chairing the Spectrum Management Task Force in this too. So I think we we understand the need for the coordination, and we've taken some steps in the Caribbean to institutionalize means for enforcing that collaboration. So,
yes, yes,
Can
very
I just
good.
add something?
Go
Yes.
ahead, Maritza, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to what was said, we are working now with different Caribbean islands, and one of them is San Lucia. And I think we have started developing the National Emergency Telecommunication Plan. In this, not only national stakeholders from the ICT sector participate, but also the private sector are invited to. So this is a very good opportunity when developing these plans to invite also the private sector and the industry to participate actively. So, and the plans provide that opportunity for everybody to come together and discuss which are the best ways to move forward.
Okay, great, Maritza.
If
Somebody wants to go? Yes.
Yeah, if I just may add, this is Hazem again. The one point that I would like to highlight is that the frequencies or the spectrum that gets used in cases of emergency is not necessarily a spectrum that is designated for emergencies. You know, there's like there was the resolution that was highlighted by Mr. Lara about emergency communications. So that is fine. This is for specific frequency bands for emergency communications. However, in cases of emergency, you often rely on just spectrum that is allocated to mobile or to FSS or whatever the case may be. And so the scope of harmonization is not only about those frequencies that are only designated for emergencies, but it should also be a broader harmonization discussion about other bands. So again, I mean, if you look at satellite spectrum, which is, you know, used commercially, so those networks are not only used for emergencies, but are used for everyday communications, and then they are available when you have an emergency, right? So the harmonization and in your everyday peacetime spectrum carries over to harmonization during the time of emergency. So it's the scope of harmonization needs to encompass not only emergency spectrum, but also broader spectrum, you know, for everyday use and allocations.
Okay, thank you, Hazim, for that intervention. I see there's a question from Luis Correra from Imasat, Brazil, and it says, how should be the plan for continental countries like Brazil? I'm not certain, and what, I guess it's emergency communications plan in that instance. So
yes,
the panel, how should the plan be for, well, that would be the emergency communication plan be for continental countries like Brazil. Don't know if Maritza wants to take a go at that question. And it's from Luis Correra from Imasat, Brazil.
So thank you. Yes, so National Emergency Telecommunication Plan should be, the national plan is an outline. It provides an overview of what to be done. But to address the different hazards and different disasters that can happen depending on the hazard, we have to develop the contingency plans. And the contingency plans provide with the opportunity to have a specific information on what to be done in a specific place. So with these, we cannot have, because the plan it does not, you know, allow you to have all that information, but the specific contingency plans can address the issue of very big countries with different hazards. So, and also, like I mentioned, we have developed, based on the guidelines that ITU had launched recently, these guidelines provide opportunity to use them, to tailor them to develop the contingency plan based on the specific hazard. So these contingency plan needs, they have to have into account the specific needs of a specific place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maritza. Nigel,
yes,
I think in terms of time, we could wrap up.
We have to wind up now.
Yes, and on the behalf of the CTU, which my organization, ECTEL, is a member, I would like to thank the ITU and the CTU for this platform, for this seminar, online seminar. I find it's a very useful platform. It provides all participants with information that's very relevant, and again, it's an excellent initiative. And again, my gratitude to the ITU and the CTU. And I would like to thank my panelists, Mr. Glendale D'Souza, the Science and Technology Officer at the Caribbean Meteorological Organization, Orande Lambert, ICT Manager at CDMA, Luis Lara, Director General at Hertzia, Hasim Mouaket, who is the Vice President of Spectrum Strategy at Intelsat, and Maritza Delgado of the ITU for some wonderful presentations. And on the behalf of the CTU and ITU, I would close this panel discussion and hand over to Mr. Nigel Casimir.
Thank you very much, Alvin, for that. We did run a bit over, so I'll shorten our break to 10 minutes or just under 10 minutes before the next panel. So we will take a break now and resume. Let's aim to resume at 10 minutes before 11 our time, which is really in a little less than 10 minutes from now, with the next panel, which would be looking at transport systems. And the moderator there is Mr. Carlos Bogans of the ITU. So we will sign off now. And Carlos, if you need to communicate with your panelists or anything like that, do so via the platform. And
yeah. Hi, good morning, Nigel. Thank you. I will do it. Yeah, I will make a test. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're on break. Take a comfort break and be back shortly. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Bogans. It's a pleasure to be moderator for the panel on transport systems. The subjects for today's discussion are related to aeronautical and maritime matters. Importantly, there have been several developments on aeronautical and maritime services at recent WRCs, for which we will provide some key highlights. We have three high-level panelists. I have the honor to introduce to you first Ms. Alejandra Orne, who is the International Regulatory and Market Access Senior Director for Inmarsat, which is a mobile satellite company based in London. Her main focus is market access, regulatory licensing for Inmarsat satellite network. Before joining Inmarsat, Orne Associates provided support to the telecommunication private sector as well as governments in regulatory, market access, and spectrum procurement matters, including policy development. Ms. Orne has participated for more than 20 years in ITU, CTEL, CTU, as well as represented Inmarsat in different fora. The second panelist is Ms. Tatiana Laurence, who is the Vice President on Regulatory Matters at Iridium Communications. She is responsible for leading the company's international regulatory activities, including those related to regulatory policy, ITU licensing, policy market access, and spectrum advocacy at international conferences. Ms. Laurence has also serves on the board of the US International Telecommunication Union Association. The third panelist is Mr. Emmanuel Jacques, who had been working for 17 years as SNS technician first and then as SNS manager for the Haitian Civil Aviation Authority. He joined the North America, Central America, and Caribbean region satellite communication MEVA network technical task force in 2013. Mr. Jacques is ICAO's regional coordinator for the North America, Central America, and Caribbean regions for aeronautical frequency spectrum management since 2018. He joined ICAO Frequency Spectrum Management Panel as an observer in August 2019. As for housekeeping matters, I would like to remind participants, remind participants, please use the Q&A box for any questions you may have or comments you would like to make to the attention of the panelists. So, and with any further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Alejandra Orne. Please, Ms. Orne, the floor is yours. Hello.
Her video seemed to be frozen at first. Oh, here she is. Yeah, you can. Alejandra, you can go ahead and share your screen. I'm not sure if she's hearing us.
Seems there is a technical issue.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Oh,
We can hear you now.
Okay, yes, sorry, there was a problem with, because first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel and to this seminar, which are always very interesting. I remember the first one ITU organized in Costa Rica, and thank you to ITU and CTU now for this opportunity. Just in case, where I am, we're under a storm, so connection is off and on. I hope I can go through fine. I'm going to share my screen now. Give me 1 second. We were having before trouble making this a presentation that it's I cannot go, unfortunately, to the full screen, but let me start with saying that what I'm trying to do here is to present to you what we do in aeronautical, maritime, land too, which is transportation as well, and how we are developing our fleet. And as was mentioned in panels before, how the impacts the decision of ITU DWRC 19 in all this communications. I would like to show you first this is our infrastructure in terms of satellites that we have on our stations. As you can see, we have a band. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we're hearing you, and we're seeing the slide.
Okay, sorry, because I heard some noise. So we provide services, as it was indicated before in Marsat, provide services in L-band, Ka-band, and we provide in S-band in Europe for the aviation network. It shows here the satellites that we have in L-band, the different satellites. I'm going to talk about them later on Global Express, indicating what has been the development in all this in our fleet. Let me go to now where we talk about maritime services, aviation services, and later on transportation land. As you know, well, they are crucial for the operational safety and welfare of the communications. And we always have offered, of course, we're known for that, for the maritime services on L-band. And with the new satellites of Global Express, we have, we're providing not only through connectivity, ship operations, and we have now over 7,500 FX terminals activated, which is the Fleet Express. And what's interesting is that the availability is very high on the satellites, and we're also, the amount of data through the network, it's incredible these days. As well known, we provide global maritime distress and safety system, which is required in all those big ships of more of 3 gross tons. We know, or we all know, that the Caribbean is by far maritime is the main mode of international transport for goods, and it continues. There was the ECLAC, which is the Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean of the United Nations. They showed the container throughput over the years, how it has improved from how it has increased from one year to another one. For example, 2018 to 19, it was 7.7%, etc. And obviously, in the Caribbean, it's you have the major gateway like Panama and major hubs like Jamaica, Bahamas, Colombia, Trinidad and Tobago. We also, the provision of services is not just only, because you would think of commercial services, which of course, I'm talking about that, but the government and the Navy has also, is also using not only, of course, L-band, but K-band. And the services have been in Colombia and Argentina and Chile that they are utilizing, and they have proven that the services, even in worse conditions, like in the Antarctica and Chile, has proven very successful. In aviation, one thing I would like to mention, even though it's not, since the previous panel talked about crisis, etc., with the COVID virus these days, one of the things that we're working is with crew and healthcare specialists, they can and software platforms to provide free COVID-19 video calls. And this is with trained professionals. And this service it's available today over 150 vessels, and plus I think it's almost like 900 in the pipeline. So that the situation requires, we know that we recognize, let's say, the needs of maritime areas facing prolonged isolation. You see the crews and they are far from land-based medical assistance, which is critical, the role they play in the cargo vessels for the global economy. In the aviation, in aviation, we have provided, equipped many of the airlines with Global Express, which is, as we explained, I will give just only a summary of what K-band and its high throughput has been very important, not only for cockpit communications, but also for the passenger cabin. And we have customers in well, all the main airlines. And if I'm going to mention Lufthansa, Qatar Airways, Philippine Airlines, and we have Avianca in the Americas. And commercial and private jet airlines are also using Inmarsat broadband services for passengers and connectivity much more. I would like to indicate that, of course, with the situation of the COVID virus, the airline now has decreased in certain business, but recently we have many few airlines right now that they have precisely are installing the terminals for Global Express. And maritime service, on the other hand, has increased tremendously. And we have been, we realize the importance for those vessels that cannot basically go to port for certain circumstances today. We have something interesting, which is the cockpit data is encrypted and is separated from the passenger data, uses a different network. And this offers a level of security and demand for passengers or the data that does not affect safety critical cockpit data. I would like to show you this is recent. This is transportation services that we provided to Rumo Railway. Rumo Railway is 14,000 kilometers of railway track in Brazil, and we're focusing with our service provider down there on the northern railways because they connect 6 key states to a port that's called Port Santos, which is one of the busiest container ports. The connectivity has been very important to them, and it has shown, between other things, that they don't they're going through areas that are remote. They're going through areas that they don't have reliable network. So the accurate real-time tracking of the trains is very important. The communication between the drivers, the maintenance, and also the communication between the regional centers. So this has been provided with L-band in this case, and that ensures a safe railroad network and more profitable as well. What I just wanted to remark is the integration of information communication technology here with the transport infrastructure in all 3 areas. Going to, as I mentioned, and as Nigel mentioned at the very beginning, how it has the frequencies are now in K-band, and we're going to Q and V. So in the K-band, we have solutions for spectrum congestion, and the advantages as we see here, and I'm not going to go through all this because I think we have explained that yesterday and at some fashion today: high-speed data, smaller antennas, ubiquity, reliability, and mitigation techniques for rain attenuation to guarantee the availability of the region. So this is one of the, in here, this is why we're developing, this is the schedule of launches for the Global Express fleet, which I'm going to show in the next slides. I don't want to go through this one since. We have, for example, the Inmarsat 6A and 6B that they are going to be full electric with requiring chemical propulsion, increasing the L-band processing power, and then supplying K-band payload capacity. Here, I want to show you the, this is the evolution of the Global Express, and we're having 3, Global Express 7, 8, and 9. And one of the many things is the dynamic capacity because of beam forming that replaces the traditional spot beams and creates thousands of independent beams of different sizes and bandwidth and power, and they can be reconfigured. You have backward compatible, meaning that the existing Global Express customers will be able to benefit from the next generation enhancement using their current terminals. Cybersecurity, as I explained before, of course, today this is a very important issue, and it's been always, but every day it's more. The satellites are designed so that they have a flexible coverage, so they are gateway agnostic. So this gives you an idea and a panorama on how the evolution of the satellites are today. We, in the previous slide, where it has of the Global Express, we have one of the Global Express, which is going to be a elliptical orbit that's going to be covering the Arctic, and it's we're building on Inmarsat current capabilities above the 65 north, and this is not just only for this is for aviation. This is for the specific needs of merchant fleets and vessels, sufficient vessels that they require connectivity and high-speed broadband to drive major operation and to have some more efficiency in their operations. And the Arctic Circle, as we all know, represents a rapid growing connectivity region for high-quality broadband and increases the requirements from maritime customers. Going now to the what we were talking about, how impacts WRC-19 on the spectrum, and how the satellite industry in general has developed, and every time the technology it's better and better. We in the in WRC-19, there was a decision regarding the use of the SIMs, as we know, stations in motion, in the band 17.17, 19.7, and 27.5, 29.5 gigahertz. And the Earth stations, according to Resolution 169, it's kind of an expansion from WRC-15. WRC-15, we're talking about 19.7, 20.2, 29.530. And the resolution, basically what it says is that the SIM shall operate and communicate within the envelope of Earth stations of that GEO satellite network, and limits are adopted for sharing with NGSO MSS, and optional guidelines for sharing with NGSO MSS through the links. Also, the annex contains limits for use when the system, SIMs operating frequencies that are overlapping those used by terrestrial services. I would like to emphasize that the limits on Annex 3 should really be applied in portions of the band where terrestrial systems actually operate. And below you see some of the conditions of operation and maritime minimum distance, 70 kilometers. If you go within that distance, it's required an agreement with the coastal state. There's a maximum ERP density established. If it's high, subject to agreement. Aeronautical SIMs, it's regarding the PDF map that there was a big discussion above 3,000 meters and tighter mass below. And in land, and I think that yesterday was mentioned as well in one of the presentations, transmitting an SIM shall not cause unacceptable interference with terrestrial services in neighboring countries, so to which the brand is allocated in and operate in accordance with these regulations. This is a very important issue because the decisions are applicable as of July 2020, but also it's with the demand of K-band, the demand of connectivity, mobility, we and all the ones who are we're going to use these bands and are in planning currently for the provision of, for example, Global Express in our case. The SIMs, they don't have any regulatory different status than that comes or derives from the GSO FSS network under Resolution 169. And these outcomes and with the annex and the guidelines, etc., it provides, I think, a good platform for administrations to authorize SIMs across the full band and within the FSS allocation. I'm going to go now to 3 more slides. And in that respect, we also talk about the L-band spectrum. As you know, of course, that Inmarsat uses L-band. You have the standard L-band that is, let me see if I can expand this to show this better. This standard L-band that you see there. INT band was allocated in the WRC 1427 to 1518. And the current operators of the L-band, as you can see, Suraya, Inmarsat, RSPC, MTSA, Ligado, Telecom Mexico, etc. And the spectrum is shared by operators on geographic frequency base. The L-band, the extended L-band, is currently used by Inmarsat. We have AlphaSat that covers Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And the next Inmarsat 6 will be will allow to expand the global coverage of the extended L-band. So our comment here is that if INT is going to operate below 1518, it could cause harmful interference. It will cause to the standard L-band. Here I'm showing a graphic of the out-of-band emissions and blocking, because it's not just only below 1518, above 1518, but it's also really going way back to 1545, the interference. And you can see here that the graphics, and it will impact all LAN terminals, L-band terminals, and including those that are for GNDSS. So you can see the blocking interference here on the right, the signal, LTE signal received by mobile earth stations on the adjacent frequency, and the out-of-band emission as well. So the outcome on this during the radio assembly and the WRC 19 was a recommendation to facilitate the adjacent band compatibility, including additional frequency separation below 1518, and also to address the coexistence of INT and MSS through protection for MSS around airports, seaports, and after this, the WRC 19 adopted Resolution 223 that resolves to ensure the continued operation of the MSS and complete studies to provide the coexistent measures. So all terminals are vulnerable to blocking interference from the mobile systems, and the 1518 megahertz to interference from the LTE out-of-band emissions. So it's important in that sense to work together with regulators to establish a fair technical condition for MSA and LTE, and including participation in all these study groups like 5G and 4G to complete the work in that respect to protect the current and future MSS. So this is just a summary of what we're doing, what we're developing on our satellites, and how this has affected us or not, or impact us, and how we would like, in that sense, to basically emphasize the importance of the decisions in the ITU and the importance of administrations participating, as well as the regulators to take into account all these resolutions and decisions into their telecommunications plan. I think with this, I finish my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ornes, for your very interesting presentation. And so we're moving on, and I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Tatiana Laurence. Tatiana, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I would like to thank the ITU and CTU for inviting me to speak here. I've been working with CTU and CETEL for 4 years on one of the agenda items for WRC 19, and CTU were instrumental, and it would be my pleasure to present about this maritime related agenda item, GMDSS, that was discussed at WRC. I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see the screen, Carlos?
No, we don't see it. So yeah, it's okay. It's okay now.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we do see.
So as I mentioned, the agenda item is related to maritime safety, GMDSS, Global Maritime Distress Safety Systems. Before I go into this agenda item, I just want to quickly introduce what Iridium is. It's a global constellation, low Earth orbit constellation of 66 satellites. So they're constantly moving around the globe, providing global coverage. We have a significant milestone we achieved last year. The constellation existed for about 20 years. And Iridium fully replaced the constellation and launched 81 new satellites. We launched it on SpaceX over the course of 2 years. And every satellite is replaced, and now we have a brand new constellations with faster data speeds and new capacity, new services, and also that enables GMDSS service. So for 4 years, we have been working on this agenda item, which was agenda item 1.8, which addressed actually addressed two independent issues. One was GMDSS modernization, which I'm not going to talk here about. And one is the introduction of additional satellite systems and regulatory measures that ITU has to take to accommodate the additional satellite provider, which was Iridium. It was resolution 359. So what is GMDSS? GMDSS is a set of, first of all, it's an international set of communication systems. They're used for vessels which are in distress. It's mandatory on all vessels over 300 tons, and it's used for rescue work, for navigation safety, for transmitting weather alerts and other alerts. So this GMDSS is managed by International Maritime Organization and other United Nations agency. But the previous GMDSS system, while combining terrestrial and many other, satellite telecommunications components and a lot of different spectrum, had till 2018 only one satellite system as part of GMDSS. So Iridium decided, since it's a global system, we need to apply to be the additional satellite provider. So, and this application was submitted to International Maritime Organization in 2013. And IMO makes a very rigorous assessment of the new satellite system to make sure it complied with all the conditions. The work done by International Mobile Satellite Organization, INSEL expert group that check every compliance issue. And in 2018, IMO made a decision to approve an additional satellite provider, which truly, as we say the GMDSS stands for Global Maritime Distress System, and now with the global satellite system, it became truly global. So that was a historic event that the maritime world, which ITU had to respond and provide the spectrum assignment for this new GMDSS system. So for 4 years, we've been participating in the working parties 4C and 5B to study any possible interference, to make sure all services are protected. And the WRC 19 endorsed the decision of IMO to have an additional provider and made a allocation on the primary basis of the spectrum to the Maritime Mobile Services and identify the spectrum for GMDSS. So just, I think it's very important. We all, you know, I worked a lot with the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, with every single sector when we work and look at studies and papers. And I think it's very important to talk what it is in the real life. What does it mean for people, for all of us, each of us, for industries, for each government, for fleet, etc. And that's what I would like to, I think after the conference, it's important to tell the regulator and just to tell the story of what that means. So what GMDSS really does, especially with the Caribbean countries, where all in the ocean and around the ocean is especially important agenda item. So for what does GMDSS do? So when the ship is in distress, the ship sends the signal, you know, identifies the ship, that sends to Rescue Coordination Center. Also, the GMDSS connects the with rescue centers or other ships that are using voice services. Also, ships must receive maritime safety information, weather information, medical assistance, medical advice if necessary, meteorological information, and all is done now. Iridium came up with a new device, which I will see a little bit later, and how Iridium sees it. We call it this 3C strategy. Now, with all this function that I just mentioned, that mariners will get the coverage, with now global truly coverage, which is critical for mariners because maritime routes go through polar regions, sea areas A4, which were not covered before by satellite GMDSS. We bring capability, the faster connection to RCC, since you know, the equipment is fighting edge technology, new, and cost. We strive to provide a competitive cost to mariners for GMDSS devices, which is, as I said, mandatory. And here's the new equipment that it's going to be introduced later this year. The state-of-the-art made by Lars Krana, which you can see, it's all safety services, all emergency buttons in one device for voice, red button for distress, and that's the equipment now that mariners will have a choice to use. And as I said, I just want to switch from the studies and compatibility studies, which were critical for successful outcome of this agenda item, to what benefits this agenda item brought to the world, to administrations and countries. First of all, the global coverage of Iridium, it's critical that polar regions and sea areas, which are called A4, is now will be covered. Because the Iridium system is a low Earth orbit and any ship is always inside of satellites, the GMDSS now can operate and reach any ship, and vice versa. The ship can see the satellites and make an instant connection with the ships. The new terminals, they provide more accurate information and distress, you know, signals and ships identification. And I think the most important, and I actually had a lot of conversations during the preparation to WRC 19. I talked to mariners at CTU, at CTEL, I talked to regulators, and a lot of questions were asked about the second providers, introduction of second providers. So for the first time, with this decision of ITU, the mariners around the world will have a choice of choosing what equipment they want to use of the ship. In the end of the last day of WRC, the plenary, the WRC chairman referred to this agenda item as one of the most important agenda items of WRC 19. And why? Because it is about the maritime safety, about the safety of life, about global coverage. I also would like to mention the outstanding cooperation of a joint effort of two United Nations agencies, of IMO and ITU. IMO wanted to have a second provider, did all the groundwork and acceptance and approvals, but the missing piece was the approval by ITU, and this is an extremely successful joint effort and of working together. And I think the most important human aspect of this decision that improves the safety of life. It's now we know that any piece of the earth, if something happens with the ship, response will be on the way, and it will be covered by GMDSS system. So with that was the story about agenda item 1.8. And again, thank you very much to ITU and CTU for this opportunity to talk about.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for your very, very good presentation. And now we are moving to our final presentation. And I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Emmanuel Jacques, who represents ICAO at this panel. Emmanuel, the floor is yours, please. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Do you hear me?
We can hear you well, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would like, first of all, on behalf of the ICAO NAC regional office, to thank CTU for hosting this seminar and support of ITU. So now I'm gonna share my screen for my presentation. Let me know if you see it.
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. Okay. Okay, so my presentation will be mostly to present the challenges of the aeronautical service, and foremost in the area of the North American and Caribbean region. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge that the ICAO NAC regional office has like 22 member states, which covers mostly the Caribbean and North American countries, and also the Central American countries. You can see the list of countries here. We have like the Bahamas, Canada, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Haiti, from this list, and also the French 19 territories from the French Netherlands, United Kingdom, and United States. Those states and territories represent 26 civil aviation authorities and 44 flight information region, and mostly 15 of the flight information regions are in the Caribbean and 29 in the North American. As an industry worldwide, you can see that the air transport industry is a very growing rapidly industry, and worldwide it's been growing like at a rate of 4.5% average per year, and each 15 years it doubles last year only, we had like 4.5 billion passengers and 38.9 million aircraft departures. And those numbers also doubles every 15 years. And in terms of value and the air transport industry represent more than 30% of the world trade. And to support also this industry and to support the growth, it is important that we have a very performant air transport system, which require air traffic management performance. And air traffic management performance, air traffic services, it is directly related to the performance of communications, navigation, and surveillance system. So it is important to be able for the controllers to assure good operations, that they are able to have to speak rightly with the pilots, and navigation system, on ground navigation system, GNSS navigation system, surveillance system like radar systems, and ADSB, the new technology, multilateration. All those systems require availability and also access to frequency spectrum. Therefore, also to be able to have access to frequency spectrum, it is important that the ICAO and all the member states have a very present in the ITU World Radio conferences, and also World WRC preparatory processes, and also and work closely with the regional telecommunication organizations like the CTU. And for this, ICAO has developed many tools for the management and also the defense of the aviation frequency. We have the ICAO frequency spectrum strategy, which is a high-level vision on existing and future spectrum requirements and support of the evolving CNS systems and infrastructure requirements. Also, ICAO frequency policy statements. Those statements is of official policy on each and every frequency band used by aeronautical systems for the provision of CNS infrastructures and system. But what's important in our case here is the ICAO position for the World Radio Communication Conference. This position is a specific agenda items of the upcoming ITU WRC to ensure that aeronautical requirements and safety concerns are met. And it is very important to put emphasis on the ICAO position, because the continuous increases in air traffic movement, as well as the additional requirement for accommodating new and emerging applications, such as unmanned aircraft systems, UAS, drones, and commercial suborbital vehicle flights. Those types of new systems are placing an increased demand on both the aviation regulatory and air traffic management mechanisms that should be developed. As a result, the airspace is becoming more complex, and the demand for frequency assignments and consequential spectrum allocations is increasing. While some of this demand can be met through improved spectral efficiency of existing radio systems and frequency bands currently allocated to aeronautical services, it is inevitable that these frequency bands may need to be increased, or additional aviation spectrum allocation may need to be agreed upon to meet this demand. So in this regard, the ICAO position aims at protecting aeronautical access to appropriately protect spectrum for radio communication and radio navigation systems that support current and future safety of flight application. In particular, it stresses that safety considerations require that adequate protection against harmful interference must be ensured. So the ICAO position put the accent on safety for air traffic service, air services operation, and for this, WRC 19 was held last year, and we had some results, but ICAO is important for ICAO and the member states work harder, because we are already some of the results from ICAO WRC 19. Some of the key points that were relevant from the last World Radio Conference were not met. Some of the expectations were not met, and the new WIC ICAO position for 2023, ICAO has already working on this, since it's a 4-year process. And for this, the ICAO Spectrum Management Panel assumes the task of preparing the new position of ICAO for the WRC 23. And the process has, as you see in the slide, is the FSMP panel work on the prepare the new ICAO frequency, and which is reviewed by the Air Navigation Commission and sent to all the member states. And after finalization, the ICAO Council approved the WIC, and which is spread to the states. And for the new WIC, it will address agenda items that have issues where aviation will need action by the WIC 23, like agenda items 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, and 9.2. And one of those agenda items is also, if we take agenda items 1.8, is to consider appropriate regulatory actions to accommodate the use of fixed satellite services networks by control and non-payload communication from unmanned aircraft systems. And we will also have address agenda items issues that could potentially affect the aviation use, like agenda items 1.1, where to consider possible measures to address in the frequency band for 4,800 to 4,990 megahertz, protection of stations of aeronautical and maritime mobile services located in international airspace and waters from other stations located within national territories. So it is important that the member states of ICAO support the ICAO position. I know we're just starting the process period, but at the release, it will be important that we be more present in those conferences of ITU to promote that position. So the frequency challenges in the NAMCAR region is we have like for all the member states and territories, we have put out a list, a database information of all the frequencies and operations, and those lists, this database must be updated no later than 2021 before the WRC, so that we can each state should submit it to their national frequency spectrum authority. It is important also to work closely with the civil aviation authorities to ensure the protection, avoid as much as possible the interference of the frequencies needed for the current and future aeronautical services. Development of the future phase of the MEVA network. The MEVA network is the satellite communication network that enables operation between the states and the CAR region, like Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, Aruba, Curacao, the COSESNA region, and the United States. And we are already moving from we are right now in phase 3 of the MEVA network, and we are already moving to phase 2. The request for information was sent 1 month ago to all the operators and service providers to see how we can accommodate the future communication support for new services in the region. Also, ICAO needs to ensure the implementation of their strategy of no country left behind in the region. We need to work as much as possible together so that for the region we have a seamless operation. Well, for the strategy to support the ICAO position in the NAMCAR region by the states, states should, in preparing their proposal to the ITU WRC 23, include in the maximum extent possible the agenda items listed in the ICAO position for WRC 23. It is important, like I said earlier, that states work closely with their frequency spectrum authority to ensure that the protection of the operational frequencies does show safety of flight. Because we have realized that the civil aviation authorities and the spectrum authorities, we recommend that they forms a task force to work on the frequencies, knowing the constant demand on the spectrum for aviation. Also, states to include representative of their civil aviation administration and experts from aviation and their national delegation to the extent possible. So This will be possible if, like I said, the Civil Aviation Authority and the Specific Frequency Spectrum Authority work close together, and this and will be motivated, and the delegations participating in the ITU and regional preparatory activities for WRC 23, and also ensure to the extent possible that the delegation to the WRC include representatives of their civil aviation administration. Mostly, this is the position of ICAO for the WRC, and in what we would like to emphasize is that aviation is mostly about safety, and to have safety, we need good communications system, we need good navigation system, and also good surveillance system, and those system put lots of pressure on the frequency band, and it's important that all the organization work together so that we can have a good and safe air transport industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And I would like to thank once again to all panelists for their excellent presentations. And now we proceed to Q&A. And I would like to ask some questions from my side, just to initiate some maybe discussion. So first question is, in your view, what is the impact of COVID-19 on the aeronautical and maritime industries and on people's lives? So, would somebody like to?
Yes,
to
I'm
answer?
trying to.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Alejandra.
Yes, hello again.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, I think it's a big impact of the COVID-19 in. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Well.
Sorry. COVID in maritime and in aeronautical. Aeronautical, of course, we know that due to the situation, many of the airlines, of course, until it's, they have some period of time, but until the countries allow aircraft to do their normal business, the aircraft, of course, they are not then traveling. There are less passengers, but at the same time, they are kind of looking at how they are going to, and that's what they're doing right now, how they're going to prepare for the post-COVID virus, COVID-19, and they are working in many of the airlines in reorganizing, and at the same time still installing many of the terminals, thinking, of course, that once this is improved, the traveling will be not only normal, but also it's going to increase. In the case of the maritime, we know that to the contrary, we had been requested for more communication, more data, more connectivity, and even the not only just the crew, the passengers, but those are vessels that are in relative isolation, because in some cases they cannot even come to port during the last few months. So it's been that's how it has impacted, and it has impacted the life of people in the sense that the those who are traveling, who are in vessels, now they can connect to their houses, to their family, and also they have to connect the crew, the owners of the fleet, to their own offices. And in that sense, we as Inmarsat, we have provided them with different packages for those circumstances. And I think that has helped a lot, and many other satellite companies have done very much similar things.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. Tatiana, maybe you would like to also say a few words?
Sure. I'm trying to, I can't start the video, but that's okay. Thank you. I agree with Alejandra as a representative of the same satellite industry. Of course, aviation is impacted the most in the COVID-19, and I think, you know, also depending on the country, we're here in the United States since March, it's been a big adjustment and shock and how to adjust to the new conditions. And I think for the first 3 months, we really did feel the impact that, you know, I think partners around the world, users, everyone was grounded. But now, with some time passed and we adjusted, I can say that while the aviation is still in the slow mode because of the COVID, we can see actually the recovery of usage across the board, because Iridium provides the maritime services, the crew has to talk, IoT, Internet of Things, satellite Internet of Things doesn't require people, they rely on satellite around the globe. So what we learned that this satellite industry providing safety service is very resilient. And that's why it needed the most during COVID. And we are very proud to provide this connection to customers and governments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. And Emmanuel, maybe you have also some comments on this.
Well, my comment will be mostly how it affected operations on mostly ATC operations for the aeronautical service providers, because you know that first of all you cannot have you have shortage of staff, and some member states we even have where that we were obliged that in the control centers that controllers were getting sick from the COVID-19, which made operations had to change their strategies to see how to ensure at least a minimum of operation, because as you know, we didn't have commercial air flight, but we still had cargo traffic, and that we had to assure that still air traffic operations was available for all the stakeholders involved in those type of cargo operations. It was very difficult. Things are getting in the regions. Things are starting back slowly, but we're still very far ahead from how things were last year at the same period of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. And I have another question. Actually, it is related to GMDSS. We have results of WRC 19, and Iridium will soon provide GMDSS services. And so, as we know, WRC adopted Agenda Item 111 on GMDSS modernization, which will also consider additional GMDSS satellite service provider. And what in your view, what benefits additional GMDSS satellite service providers would bring to the maritime community, and how does it impact the GMDSS market?
Carlos, I'll be happy to answer that. I think you're thinking and hinting about the more competition. And Iridium has no issues with competing with other providers. I think the more competition, the better for existing providers. Most importantly, we're very welcome by mariners because they get the most benefits after all, the less expensive equipment, better technology. And as far as the Agenda Item 111, with the new GMDSS system coming along, I would say that we have the same concern similar to the one many had when Iridium was going through approval. Is it going to be approved by International Maritime Organization first, before the WRC, in our case 19, in this new system case, WRC 23 can act on it? So I think that it has to go the route as every GMDSS provider went through a more rigorous assessment of the system. And once it's approved by IMO, then WRC 23, well, first ITU has to study it on interference. And I think the existing providers, currently now two, will have to make sure since we operate some in the same frequency band and some in adjacent band, I think that we need to make sure that the existing GMDSS satellite operators don't experience any interference, and the new system is properly coordinated per the ITU satellite coordination procedure, and then before the WRC 23 can make this decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would like to make some comments on this?
Yeah, Alejandra.
Yes.
They are, as Tatiana said, there is Inmarsat and Iridium now as GMDSS, but also there is another navigation system, Baidu, that requested to the IMO for GMDSS. Of course, like we all say, this is for safety. And one of the things that we did, for example, in order to have a new service to support GMDSS, we received from IMO something that's called a fleet safety solution, which basically combines the maritime safety and the broadband data services. So all these systems will provide, as also ICAO was mentioning, of course, in the case of aeronautical, which is going to be discussed to GADSS, provide safety for all these vessels and aircraft.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Ornes. And Emmanuel, do you have any view on this? Would you like to comment?
Oh. Hello? You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I think what was the question again? I kind of got
Actually,
lost.
it was more related to the maritime, and it's I mean maybe
Okay.
it's not your field. It is
No,
okay if you have no comments, no problem. So it
no
was
comments. No
on market
comments.
share and how additional GMDSS service providers. I mean how the users benefit from the additional GMDSS service providers.
Oh, okay. No comments.
Okay, no comments. Thank you very much. So actually in Q&A, we have one question. Shall I read it out or you can see it? So it is a question, I'm not sure if this question could be answered by the panel, but why are the DSC enabled maritime radios so expensive? And so the price is mentioned, and radios are offered to them such as they are able to communicate with our GMDSS system. So DSC is I assume that this is a question different from satellite-related equipment. This is about digital selective calling equipment, and yeah, yeah. Do you have some comments on this? Hello.
I know this is the digital selective calls, and this is a core part of the GMDSS, but in terms of the prices, I really cannot answer that question. I'll have to go to somebody who deals with that.
Yeah, Tatiana, you.
I'm reading the questions, and actually the emergency calls for any GMDSS providers are free. When the ship needs to make distress call, they're free. So I'm not sure.
No,
I think the question is more related to
if
I may clarify.
Offerings, but speaking of GMDSS, it's free to send the distress.
Yeah, I think it's not about communications, it's more about equipment. And I think this is equipment. And I think this is just equipment which can be used also on yachts, but it is also a part of GMDSS carriage requirements. I mean, I think in general, all of GMDSS equipment which corresponds to standard are very high quality, and they are waterproof. And I mean, and the price, I think, it comes from that. And yeah, I know the issue is that not everyone can afford this equipment, and that's why people use also mobile phones in the sea. But I mean, really, when issues happen, this equipment are very helpful to send out distress call and to SAR center, and so I think the price is justified here. I'm not able to make any comment because I do not represent industry, but I'm just I think it is based on really high standard, and yeah.
Carlos, if I might be allowed
yeah, no problem. It's over to you.
No, I'm not.
Thank you very much.
You still have a couple minutes, but I want to ask something here. In our preparations for WRC 19, one of the topics we saw, and this is an aeronautical related question, one of the topics we saw was addressing the development of a GADSS, Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System. And if I'm not mistaken, I think going forward to WRC 23, that there'll be an item related to frequencies for that. I think maybe some testing needs to be done before decisions could be taken. I don't know if Emmanuel knows anything about this, and if he could provide any clarification. A GADSS, Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System.
What?
So, Emmanuel, would you like to make a comment, or you on GADSS? It's agenda item 110 of WRC 19.
He seems to be having some issue with his microphone. Let me see if I can help him. No, I was trying to unmute him, but I can't. So he came on, but we weren't.
Yeah, I mean, in general, yeah. I mean, the studies were not finished. The agenda item, it was, so it decided that there is no need to make any changes in radio regulations because the equipment are changing, and it's a kind of dynamic process, and these changes, it could be difficult to reflect them in the radio regulations. So I think that is the main conclusion on this agenda item 110.
All right, thank you.
But maybe Emmanuel is able to complement if he wishes. So, Emmanuel?
Let me see if he had, I'm not seeing anything in the chat from him. Oh yes, he says he's having a problem with his connection. He can't speak right now. He's not able to speak.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
So, I mean, before I finish maybe this panel, I would like to thank again all of the panelists for very good presentations, excellent presentations, and very interesting discussion and feedback on my questions. So thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos, and also to the panelists in this session, Alejandra, Tatiana, and Emmanuel. In the Caribbean, I would say maritime and aeronautical in the telecom space get a little less attention than the mobile and those sorts of very, very high profile type applications. So it was good for us to have a session where we highlighted these for our benefit here in the Caribbean and in fact in the wider Americas as well. So on behalf of ITU and the CTU, then I would like to thank everyone for attending today and all the panelists and moderators that took part, in addition to the ones I just thanked from the first panel this morning on emergency communications. There was Alvin from ECTEL who moderated. We heard from Maritza Delgado from the ITU, as well as Glendale D'Souza from the CMO, Orlando Lambert from CDMO, Luis Lara from Hertzia, and Hazim Mwakit from Intelsat. We thank you for being panelists and sharing your expertise with us. We very much appreciate it. The forum continues tomorrow, and we'll have two more interesting panels. We'll actually be dealing with IMT and broadband systems tomorrow. That will be the first presentation to be moderated by Mr. Agostinho Linares from Anatel in Brazil. And the second panel should be an interesting one on spectrum pricing, which is a matter of current interest for us in the Caribbean, which ITU has assisted us in putting into this seminar as well. I'll be the moderator for that one. So I invite you all to come back and tell your friends as well about our forum tomorrow. We'll be dealing with IMT and broadband and spectrum pricing. So
Nigel?
Yes.
Yes, just a little precision, just to mention that the IMT forum will be moderated by Mr. Linares from Anatel, but on behalf of Regulatel. the Latin American Forum of Regulators.
Ah, okay, thank you. Thank you, yes. He's on the executive board of Regulatel, correct. Any other comments, Joaquin? This is Joaquin Restrepo from ITU.
No, thanks again to CTU and to all the other participants for your time during these 10 days. We are just 2 days more, and
Yes.
we are more than glad with that. Just to remind that in Friday, we are going to send you to your emails a survey. So we really appreciate your feedback that will help us a lot to improve this kind of meetings.
Yes, definitely, especially since this is our first time in the region doing a Zoom-related platform for this purpose. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you again at 9 a.m. Eastern Caribbean time, that's UTC-4, tomorrow morning for a session on IMT and broadband systems. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.